listening to Shop Talk with your host, Kevin Tates. Brought to you by Eastwood Tools. Everything you need to do the job right.
Hey, gearheads, you're listening to Shop Talk. I'm your host, Kevin Tates. Well, it's a whole new year, 2014, if you can believe it. And we've got another very interesting interview to kick off the year. So here's a riddle. What do Model A's, Gary Allan, classical guitar, Jay Leno and David Letterman, Salt Flats Racers, Steve Earle, Gojo Hand Cleaner, John Prine, Mark Lambert, the DIY Network, Gibson Les Pauls, Roots Rock, Lucinda Williams, and Nashville, as well as Tom Sparks and Big Block Chevelles all have in common? Well, the answer is David Steele. A guy who's got a dual life that most of us would envy, and a man that pursues his passions with a work ethic that is quite rare. David and I became friends while he lived in Nashville, and have remained friends for a lot of reasons, one of which is that we both believe in preserving the historical aspects of the automotive aftermarket industry and hobby. David is a successful professional live and studio guitar player with a resume that's as diverse as it is vast, and he grew up living and loving all things automotive. His foundation in the automotive hobby drove him to seek out the roots of the whole thing and study the formative years of hot rodding, all while touring the world in front of audiences cultivating his other love, which is, of course, music. Take a listen to what David Steele has to say and how we talk about the foundations and fundamentals that we live by. You're listening to Shop Talk. I'm your host, Kevin Tates. We're sponsored and brought to you by the Eastwood Company. Do the job right with Eastwood. Well, we've got him on the phone. It took a couple of tries because Dave is a busy guy, but we've got David Steele on the phone. And Dave, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's great talking to you, Kevin.
You too. So you're coming to us from California. Tell our listeners where in sunny California you're calling from.
I'm in North Hollywood. I'm basically on the what they call the Valley. And I'm on kind of the Burbank, Toluca Lake side of North Hollywood.
The reason I ask that is because we're going to go straight to the heart of it. That is the birthplace of this whole thing that we wrap our heads around. That is Hot Rod Central. I mean, that area that you're in is the proving grounds. It's the genesis. It's the nucleus. It's where all of us gearheads look to, or at least look to at one point, for trends. So what's it like, man? I mean, is there a cool hot rod vibe there still?
Oh God, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge part of the culture. You know, you feel it and you see it everywhere, and not just in. I mean, although you do, you know, you see old cars, classic cars, modified cars, you know, in traffic regularly. But I don't know, there's something about the fashion. There's a bit of a kind of flair for the kind of youth-inspired hot rod kind of fashion thing that you see around a lot as well. And so I think it permeates a lot of stuff, kind of, you know, beyond the car world, interestingly. And I obviously like that. I think it's way cool. Yeah,
no doubt. Well, and of course the climate out there is very kind to automobiles, as you and I both know, but so that's kind of a neat thing. Well, let's introduce our listeners to David Steele. You and I have a couple of different things in common. In the first place, we've both at one point at least been working musicians, and you are still that. So if you don't mind blowing your horn just a little bit, give us a little bit of background on well, let's just say, how did you get into the music industry first?
Well, I mean, as far as getting into it on a professional level, I attended Berklee College of Music in Boston. Really kind of, you know, that's just such a kind of microcosm of the music industry anyway. You kind of are introduced to, you know, at least the skeletal structure of what the music industry is. You know, I started, you know, working, doing sessions and whatnot while I was still a student, and I was really, really lucky. I'm from upstate New York. I'm from Buffalo originally. But my parents, this would be interesting to some car guys, especially muscle car guys. My dad was a lifelong employee of General Motors, and he worked for the Tonawanda metal casting plant, where so many of our great Chevrolet muscle car engines come from. He started in '63, just as the 409 was transitioning out and into what would become the big block Chevy. And he was there until like 83, I think, so 20 years. And then, you know, the kind of crash of the auto industry, at least the early 80s crash kind of happened, and we were relocated to southern Indiana, to a little town called Bedford. They had an aluminum casting plant there doing transmission cases and stuff like that. And so when I got out of Berkeley, I finished high school in Indiana, and then went to Berkeley. When I got out of Berkeley, came back to southern Indiana, and it was just the greatest gift in the world, because there was a phenomenal music scene in Bloomington, where IU is, and it was somewhat fueled by the presence of John Mellencamp and his band.
Yeah.
Not only were they based there, but they all had these projects, you know, and these side projects and stuff. And I got to play in some of those bands and got to know some of those guys. And that's really what got me into the music business professionally, because, you know, I had no idea how lucky I was at the time that, you know, within a year of graduating college, you know, at 22, I'm playing in this guy Larry Crane's band, who is basically John Mellencamp's Keith Richards. They went to high school together, put the band together, wrote a lot of the songs together. Larry's playing guitar on all of those classic John Mellencamp songs.
Yeah, those great guitar tones too, man.
Oh my God! I mean, that I continue to chase and will continue to chase for the rest of my life. I mean, just the beginning of Small Town alone is.
I was just thinking about that song. Is that a Telecaster on that song?
I'm sure there's a Telecaster in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
it's a signature. It's a trademark.
Well, yeah, and you know, to me, not to go down this rabbit hole, but to me, when Larry Crane left the band in 1990, he took the sound of it with him. And I think if anybody is a fan of that music, you can kind of recognize that. But so he put a solo project together, hired me to be his lead guitar player, and this was like within a year of college. We were out on the road opening for Bad Company and playing arenas, and it was just insane. And I thought, I mean, I was so naive. I thought, well, this music business thing is great.
Well, let me ask you something. Yeah. Let me interrupt you for a second, Dave. You say it like it's a light thing, but Berklee School of Music, and you won a scholarship, by the way, there. You didn't just pay your way in. Just for people that are listening, that's very prestigious. And I know from knowing you as a person and doing a little bit of research that you started off with classical guitar as well. And for me, as a wannabe guitar player and a musician as well, I understand how important fundamentals are with music and with what you and I both share in the automotive industry. So my question is this now, is that those formative years and that hammering home of foundation and fundamentals on the guitar, would you say that helped you walk through some doors?
Oh, absolutely.
And be prepared for it?
Absolutely. Yeah, man. I mean, I started playing guitar when I was 7 and quickly found a classical instructor who was basically just a Segovia disciple, and that's all we worked on. I mean, that was the only kind of guitar that existed, but what's wonderful about that guitar playing is it works your hands in a way that few things could. I mean, you know, maybe jazz guitar, you know, would approach it, but even at that, I mean, the intricacy of those pieces and the fingerings, it kind of prepares you for anything that comes at you after that, as far as physically and just an understanding of how the instrument works, you know, just up and down the neck. I mean, just the simple mechanics of it. And that foundation is, I mean, I recognize it still to this day. With certain things I do, I'll kind of realize, oh, that's funny. That's a little kind of Segovia-esque kind of voicing I'm playing right now. And I might be playing on like a pop country session or an alternative rock session, and I'm still using those tools that I learned, when I started. So
I was about to ask you if those influences get drugged from those fundamentals into, a part of your resume is the unbelievably great Steve Earle and some of the sessions, as well as countless live shows, I'm sure, with Steve Earle. It's quite a spread. It's quite a stretch from Segovian classical guitar to banging out Steve Earle tunes, which are, they were in the country genre, so to speak, with Copperhead Road and that stuff, but not really country music, kind of rock and roll, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But that being said, I always have to credit this guy anytime I get here in conversation, talking about like guitar and my beginnings with guitar. At 13, I found a new instructor in this town that we moved to who looked at what I was, brilliant guy. He looked at what I could do and what my talents were and what my abilities were, again, just on classical guitar. And he knew that we had talked about, I kind of want to try to play an electric guitar and see what that's like. And you'll love this, his way of bridging into that, or moving into that, was to teach me to play the Dire Straits song, Sultans of Swing.
Oh, nice.
Which is
very
genius.
Nice.
It's genius because Mark Knopfler, the guitar player for Dire Straits, he plays with his fingers. And
he does.
That whole song is full of double stops and finger rolls and arpeggios, and it basically showed me that, like, all these tools, all this Segovia stuff actually can translate into that, and continued to, because then when I, started studying Chet Atkins, there's a whole ton of that stuff that translates into Chet Atkins, who, by the way, was studying Segovia his whole life. So
really,
it's kind of funny that by the time I got to Nashville in '93, I was so into songwriters and songs and that kind of roots American folk-based kind of songwriting world, which is now called Americana music, I guess. But John Prine was my first. That was the first band I joined, and I worked with John for a couple of years. And again, it's like all of those tools that I had learned when I was a little kid were continuing to translate and continue to translate, into Steve Earle's band and everything I do. So, and I know that there's definitely, you can articulate this a lot better than me, but there's that thing about fundamentals that if you really nail those down, they'll never leave you. Even if you don't take the time to sit back and remove yourself and notice it, it's there. It's there.
100%.
Oh my God, it's the make or break, really.
Well, it's the fallback, too. It's the reminder of what you know. And we can stretch the rules, but we got to know them in the first place. And that analogy is so good for what I do with the Paintucation series and what I try and help people do and try and help people get a little bit more information and get a leg up. And as you do as well. You participate in things like Cars and Guitars and try and, show people that there's connections between the two and that there's, room for not only mentoring people, but also recognizing nostalgia and the necessity to keep these traditions going, which all comes back to fundamentals. So these analogies between music and rock and roll, you and I share them well. And I want to say something, David, to the people that are listening. If you get the chance to go to YouTube and you punch in David Steele guitar player, you're going to find a plethora of really interesting stuff. I know you're probably blushing on the other end of it because you're a humble guy, but you're an amazing guitar player, and I want the people that are listening to Shop Talk to check it out, because on top of being an awesome guitar player, you're a true hot rod guru encyclopedia guy, too. So it's kind of fun to see you doing that Gary Allan solo in this 100,000-seat stadium when you're out on the center thing, and you're just wailing on your gold top Les Paul. Is just cool. And then to think that that's my buddy Dave that's got dirt under his fingernails.
Yeah.
I want to point that out to people.
Well, that's very, very nice of you. I do I definitely have like dual citizenship in those two worlds. You know, I mean, you know, and possibly to a fault, but you know, I grew up with this stuff. My dad was a big car guy. I mean, just into everything, and I'm forever in debt for that. Now, go ahead.
No, we got a bit of a cell phone lag, so for people that are listening, we're not stepping on each other. It's just the nature of this, and I'm on Skype, and here we go. We're talking to people through Ethernet connections. but I wanted to ask you how, you know, I'm sure your dad was a huge influence and a mentor for you, as our dads always are. But have you got any other people that really have been an influence in your life as far as cars go and restoration and all of that world?
Well, I do, and it's funny. I mean, I kind of have this, you know, my holy trinity of car guy influence and mentorship is really, it starts with my dad, certainly, and then would include Tom Sparks, my dear friend who kind of took me under his wing in the mid-'90s and really changed my life. And then my friend Mark Lambert, our mutual friend Mark Lambert in Nashville,
yes,
who also changed my life just because, you know, Mark works at a level, and my dad was brilliant, certainly, but it wasn't his life. You know, it wasn't, you know, he had a family, he had a day job that was pretty overwhelming. So the car thing was his escape and his hobby and his passion. It's certainly all those things for Mark, but it's also his life and his day job and his art, you know?
Yeah,
And I've never been around a guy like that. Certainly not on his level. You know,
well, let me go out on a limb and say this. You rarely find somebody like Mark Lambert that goes through stress and life and passion and hobbies with the grace that man does. Would you say that's a fair statement?
That's a great way to put it, man. Yeah, he has such a great attitude and understanding of what's going on, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like he just, it's everything. It's like he understands human behavior. He understands,
yeah,
you know, which, of course, that seeps into everything, you know, at all times. But, you know, no matter how big the problem is with the car, let's say, he understands why the problem is there. You know, and I think that's such a point of frustration for so many people in the hobby, where they just like, what's going on with this thing? Why would they do this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, why have I been presented with this problem? And Lambert, so far, he has driven around that and circled back and is looking it straight in the face, and I'm fully understanding it. Well, you know, they did this because, you know, Ford were trying to make 5 cars out of one platform.
Yeah.
And they had to cut some corners, and they kind of fudged on some of the, you know, whatever, this part of the car is slightly underbuilt because of that. And I understand that because I understand manufacturing, you know. Like
right,
Lambert just sees the whole thing all the time. And it just knocks me out, you know. I mean, as you know, man, being around him, you learn stuff every time, always, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
And he's a great instructor. I mean, he can explain stuff to you and in ways that makes it, you know, like really, you know, focused.
And he's a wonderful television host, too. He had that series, Classic Car Restoration, on the DIY Network for 3 seasons, I believe, and he was wonderful at it. And so, yeah.
A total natural. It's crazy, yeah.
Yeah, Mutual Admiration Society. Well, let's talk about Tom Sparks a little bit. I never met the man, but I certainly know of him. But for our listeners that don't, maybe there's a shadow of recognition with that name. Help us understand the significance of Tommy Sparks.
Well, you know, Tommy Sparks was one of our hot rod pioneers, certainly. Born in 1926 in Iowa, but moved out to Southern California with his family when he was very young, single-digit age. And funny enough, moved to Hollywood proper, and this is amazing. the little kid who lived across the street, who ended up being his first friend that he met when he moved here, was Fred Carrillo of Carrillo Rods.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they built model. Yeah, I know. They built model planes together, and they were off and running. They were both into things mechanical, and before you knew it, he was building an AV8 Roadster, a stripped down Model A based, Ford Roadster, and racing at the dry lakes. And Tom was particularly interesting, and I think is particularly interesting to the hobby in that he tried and excelled at like pretty much every aspect of it. And I don't know if it was like I knew Tom really well. I mean, he was kind of like a second father to me. And I don't know if when he was younger, he just had such a motor in him that his attention span maybe was short or something, but, or maybe just didn't want to be left out. But, he raced at the lakes. He was, in the late 40s, a full-time employee machinist and engine builder for Eddie Meyer Speed Equipment in West Hollywood, which, by the way, at that time he worked there, he worked alongside, I mean, this is crazy. The crew at Eddie Meyer's in the late 40s was Tommy Sparks, Bud Meyer, Fred Carrillo, Ray Brown, and a young Ed Tink.
Oh, man. Okay, wow, that's the top of the heap. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's, that's just that's a big, that's a chunk of the kind of, Mount Rushmore guys that ended up shaping hot rodding as we come to know it. But, so he went from that to early drag racing, which he excelled at phenomenally. He built he broke away from Eddie Meyer. He and Ray Brown started a business together called Ray Brown Automotive. Then Tom kind of saw how that works when you put your name on something and started his own company, a speed shop in Hollywood called Sparks and Bonnie. And the first thing he did was he campaigned a Willys drag coupe, a 37 Willys drag coupe with a blown nitro burning flathead. And if you want to hear some minds blow on the other side of this podcast, for the drag racing fans out there, in 1955, Tom Sparks built a D-stroke flathead. I think it was a 242 or something cubic inch flathead, blown nitro in a Willys drag coupe with a 39 Ford Trans using only second and third gear, with a banjo rear end and a quit change. And that car, and it's in Drag News, this is real stuff, and I know the clocks worked back then and were accurate. That car, burning the tires the whole length of the drag strip practically, ran, well, the best time it ever ran was at 10:01 at 133.
You got to be kidding me.
And he was spinning that flathead to $7,000.
Unbelievable.
So,
unbelievable. And he built the engine.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's what really put Tom Sparks on the map. He kind of became one of the premier flathead engine builders in the late 40s and early 50s, and he was really one of the he was one of the real holdouts. I mean, the overhead valve engines came out of Detroit in 49. The Chrysler Hemi came out around that same time. They were just better designs. They were more efficient. They made more power easier. They took the modification better. But he was one of those guys who just stuck with the flathead. And for anybody who knows the original Tony Nancy 22 Jr. Model 8 Roadster drag car, that car had the engine, transmission, and rear end taken from the Sparks and Bonnie drag coupe and put directly in it, and that's what started Tony Nancy on his career, and Tom was a partner in that car. But, Tom also built sports car specials, Ford-based sports car specials in the 50s, did great. I mean, it was very competitive. There's a great road and track from the mid-50s. I think it's Torrey Pines, and Phil Hill is coming through the S's in a 212 Ferrari Barchetta, and right on his tail is Tommy in a Ford-based homemade special with a flathead in it. I mean, how embarrassing is that for Enzo Ferrari? But and John von Neumann, the car owner. But and you know, he raced stock cars at Riverside in '56 and '7 for Mercury. Was great at that. And then got into the movie car business and built camera cars, and then eventually went on to, in the late 60s, start Spark Specialty Automotive, where he restored award-winning cars for Pebble Beach. And, I mean, I want to say the number's 33, but I could be off. But if I'm off, it's not by much, 2 or 3, in either direction. I think he restored 33 cars that either won or placed in their class at Pebble Beach over the years.
What an unbelievable honor that it is that you had, not only to get to know him as a person and to, I'm sure, grow to love him as a man, but to be under the tutelage of somebody with that vast body of experience. It must be just, I can't imagine how great that makes you feel to have been a part of his life and him a part of yours.
It's beyond flattering, you know. I mean, it's the thing at the end of the day that this hobby's all about, you know. I mean,
yes.
We all love the cars. It's all super exciting and super fun. And there are many days when it's the reason I get out of bed. And I don't know what that says about me, but, you know, when you see out the other end of all that, it's just the people. You know, it's the people you meet, it's the friendships you make, and yes, it starts because there is a common language, but there's also a certain kind of person, I think, that involves themselves deeply in this hobby, and you know, to put it plainly, I like that kind of person, you know. So it's
sure.
a real nice thing that really serves you when you're involved in it. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat.
No, that's all right. It happens to the best of us. So you get that dry air out there when it's 70 degrees, and I hate you for it.
Ha ha.
But
well, it's funny. I actually have like a little bit of a head cold, which is absurd because it's like 82 and sunny today, and I don't know where I got this, but.
Well, Tennessee's been rocked with some pretty bizarre weather here lately. But let me ask you something about a little bit different subject here. You and I both share this as well. I love writing about this stuff, and you're a prolific writer. Your blog is excellent, and now you're writing for magazines. Tell us about some of the magazine stuff that you're doing.
Well, to be honest, I mean, the only stuff I've really done is contribute to Hot Rod Deluxe, which is a kind of the retro offshoot sister publication to Hot Rod Magazine. My friend Dave Wallace had been the editor for a few years, and I just became nuts about it. I mean, it's exciting for me to see that show up in my mailbox as a Rodder's journal, and I never thought I would say that about anything. And it's just again, it's like one of those crazy things, the way the planets align in this hobby. I went to a music show. I went to go see my old friend and boss, John Prine, play here in Los Angeles. I drove Tommy Sparks' old 29 Model A Roadster pickup, which I'm so knocked out to be able to say I'm the custodian of that these days. Tom left that for me when he passed, and it's an amazing thing to have in my life. But
well, and it was the cover vehicle for Hot Rod Deluxe, and there's a full-page spread on the story of that car as well, or the truck, I guess, if you will, as well. And it's a wonderful piece. And if you've ever read Hot Rod Deluxe, guys that are listening, I'm sure you've seen that front cover shot. So, I mean, how cool is that you drive the thing to a rock concert, man? That's awesome.
Well, that's funny you say that, because that was the number one thing that Wallace commented on, was that I drove this thing, this historic hot rod that, complete with a 1947 El Mirage timing tag and, an Eddie Meyer equipped flathead between the frame rails that Tom actually built in the 40s.
Yeah.
And, it's an amazing thing to be able to experience and drive and use and stand next to and answer questions about. It's such an honor.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was like, well, you know, I know the band, and they'll have a bus there, and they're going to have some kind of secure parking, you know, just assuming that. It's like Friday night, and I drove this thing down there and saw Dave Wallace and met him, and I didn't know him prior to this. It's like 3 years ago. And he was just super nice, and I showed him the Roadster pickup, and he was knocked out, and we just really hit it off, and we stayed in touch. Excuse me, worked on that story together, and, you know, I just couldn't really keep my fingers out of it because it's so close to me, the story, and I do like to write, that I would just send them copy like crazy, you know, I would scan original photos from Tom Sparks' collection, and I would just say, you know, a potential caption for this might be, you know, and so, yeah, you know. So
you
over
wore
time,
him down is what happened. You wore him down.
Yeah, in a maybe not so subtle way, you know, but so he came back to me and he said, man, if you ever want to do this, let me know. You know, I need guys like you, and I especially need a younger guy who knows about the early days, which they don't have a lot of.
Right.
And that kind of started me on, you know, on this, you know, it got me in this rhythm of helping them and with stuff about the dry lakes, especially that era, which I'm so passionate about. And then, yeah, I contributed some stories and some captions and whatnot. And I also used to go down there when Wallace was still the editor, and I would proofread and fact-check the entire issue before it would go to print, which is hilarious to me considering how bad I was in school.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, that was just such a dream come true. I mean, that just being able to go to the Source Interlink offices and, you know, meet all these guys who are there still writing for Carcraft and Hot Rod. Guys I've been reading my whole life and, you know, putting faces and personalities to these names and being able to go into the Peterson archives. My God, is that just mind-blowing.
That must be amazing.
I mean, you want to talk about, like, one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. I mean, that's a lifetime of stuff to look at because they, you know, Peterson had so many publications, but, I guess it's all part of the California fantasy, you know. I mean, it's just hard to believe, how much of that stuff is still out here and it continues to be revered and saved, preserved, you know, for future generations. And, as you know, I really, really like that. That's a real passion of mine, kind of.
Well, speaking of that, let's talk for just a minute about the American Hot Rod Foundation. Are you still actively involved in that?
Absolutely. In fact, and for people who don't know, the American Hot Rod Foundation is a not-for-profit which was started by a guy named Steve Mamishian, who continues to make sure that the thing is up and running and properly driven. And Jim Miller is the the director, and I kind of work under Jim Miller, and it's a thing I do when I can, you know, between music stuff and anything else I've got going on. And that kind of works for them and it works for me. And basically what I do is I go around and contact hot rod pioneers, guys who are in their, you know, the latter part of their lives, guys in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I do filmed interviews with them. And they're usually
cool.
2 to 2.5 hour interviews. And you can go on the American Hot Rod Foundation website, which I think is ahrf.com. And there's a great, you can click on the banner that says Pioneers. And there's just a huge directory of a few hundred pioneers that they've interviewed since, I think, 2002, which is when they started this work. Might have been a year earlier than that, but anyway, right in there. And you can just click on a name. I mean, whoever you're a fan of, whether it's Tommy Ivo or Don Garlitz or, Fred Carrillo or anybody, and
Yeah.
they have half minutes and 1 minute clips of these guys talking, and it's a bittersweet project to be involved in, just because they are our World War II generation basically, and we're the math is working against them. I mean, we're losing these guys all the time, and last year
it makes it doubly important that somebody like you is involved in that, and the rest of us can appreciate it, because once that work is done, once you have made it possible for guys like me and guys like the folks that are listening to go to that website and see that, you've done the work, man. You've allowed us a glimpse into the living history, and it's noble work, and I respect you for it, and thank you for doing that on my behalf and everyone else's, as well as anybody else that's involved with the Hot Rod Foundation. I think it's great stuff, dude.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. I mean, I'd be doing it no matter what, I'm fascinated by those guys and what they accomplished with really just brawn and just crazy amounts of bravery and determination.
Sheer will.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very rare that I ever interview one of these guys and get their story and find out that they had some kind of assistance, when they were young. I mean, these kids were, Depression era kids, who went straight from that into World War II, for God's sake, I mean,
yep.
It's truly amazing. I mean, but if we want to thank someone, we really need to thank, again, Steve Mamishian, who really pours his heart and soul into this thing, and, his bank account. I mean, he funds the thing. It's that important to him. And, again, it's a not-for-profit. This thing is not, it's not like the American Hot Rod Foundation is being, built into a brand or anything. It just is this quiet thing that chugs along, and I think does a really great service for the hobby, because it captures these stories while we still can. And then you have Jim Miller, who works basically full-time, scanning these old photo collections and organizing things, labeling these photos, getting the real stories of what we're looking at and what really happened. And if he doesn't know the answer to something, he'll say, I don't know yet, but we're going to find out.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of guy you want, because, a lot of stuff gets passed around down through the years and things can get very foggy. But I love that about the foundation, that it's approached in an almost scientific way. Like, if we don't know, we're not going to say, but we'll let you know when we do,
Yeah.
But, like, I think I told you this earlier in an email. I spent the afternoon with Ed Iskandarian and Nick Arias and John Athen and Leslie Long. And I know. I drove down and had lunch with these guys, and it's just a dream come true. I mean, to be able to, I had a flathead here that I was playing with, and I had a running problem with it, and I couldn't seem to tune out the gremlin that was in this engine, and I had some questions, some valve train angle questions and stuff, and I thought, well, geez, I should just call Iski, because I know him, I mean, it's completely insane. I mean, it would be like having a question about blues guitar and going, well, geez, I should just call Clapton, I guess.
I guess,
And you're able to, I mean, the guy's still active and sharp as a tack, and he'll take your phone call and he'll talk to you about it and walk you through it, and you realize, my God, this guy is one of the truly premier pioneers. I mean, he is a treasure to our hobby. And what a different landscape we'd have if not for Ed Iskandarian. I mean, just the color and personality that is Iski, combined with his engineering genius. I mean, a guy who came up with Ed Winfield and learned everything from him, and he's a direct he's a direct descendant of Winfield. I mean, it's crazy that you can even sit down and talk with him. But, you know, and John Athen was in the booth too, you know, with us at lunch. This is 93. John Athen is 95.
Wow.
And John Athen, by the way, we really feel like we've nailed this down at the American Hot Rod Foundation. And to me, this is a very important thing when it, as far as hot rodding, traditional hot rodding is concerned, and just the way that a traditional hot rod roadster looks to us when we think of that look and that silhouette. In 1936, John Athen put a 29 Model A roadster body on a 32 frame. And as far as we know, he was the very first guy that ever did that.
And that's the hot rod. That is it.
That's the Highboy Roadster.
Yep.
You know, I mean, many important roadsters and famous roadsters were just 32 Highboys. But the real hot ticket was, I mean, and the guys by the early 40s, everybody kind of figured this out, was the rigidity of the 32 frame that had the 32 K-member in it that was set up for a V8. So you didn't have to fabricate motor mounts and all that stuff. It was a bolt-in drivetrain, but then the lightweight of the 2829 Model A Roadster body, fantastic combination, and guys are still building those all the time, every day, you know. And I'm literally sitting there talking to the guy that did that, you know. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, the quote is, if you want to go fast, you have to build in some lightness. I can't remember who said that, but I read that just recently, and it's from one of the founding fathers of hot rodding, and it's that's what that Highboy body is on the 32 chassis. That's it, you know. It
was certainly Colin Chapman's theory too, but yeah, I mean that's the secret to going fast, you know. I mean, in addition to horsepower and aerodynamics and all that stuff, but
yeah, for sure.
Anyway, I mean that's a real thrill for me to be able to know those guys and talk to those guys and be in touch with history. It's really great.
Yeah. Very cool stuff. Well, thanks for keeping on with that work, David, too. And by the way, for you guys listening, we're talking with David Steele, who is a dyed-in-the-wool hot rod guy, as well as an outstanding musician and, proud to say, a good friend. So if you ever cross paths with Dave, it's a great conversation to have. Let me ask you something else, David. You've got Tom Sparks' truck, arguably an iconic hot rod. What else do you drive? Have you still got your Chevelle?
I'll always have my Chevelle.
Was your first car, wasn't it?
It's my first car. Yeah, I bought it when I was 17.
1972, yes?
71. Yeah.
71. Okay, I get that. The front end is virtually the same, but I'll never forget in Nashville when you took me for a rip around the block in that sucker. And for you guys that don't know the car, it's got torque thrust wheels on it. It's a black on black car. It's a semi-gloss black, hot rod black finish in a built big block that will tear the nose hair out of your face. It's just will throw you back in the seat. It was a thrill ride, man. I still smile when I think about that.
Oh, that's nice of you, because I know you drive stuff at least that fast and faster on a regular basis. But, you know, the thing I'll say about my Chevelle is, and this kind of speaks to this is why my nickname is Old School Dave. It's old technology. You know, it's down and dirty, smelly, old technology. It's compression, big cam, big, you know, leaking Holley carburetor. You know, the whole thing, and on bias plies with original suspension. So it really, it ups the fear, you know, the fear level substantially. Yeah. You know, when you're dealing with the original brakes and all that stuff. But yeah. I like that. I mean, that's why I, you know, pour crazy stupid money into building 30s and 40s style, you know, dry lakes Aviate roadsters, or I should say, that's why I have been trying to build one of those cars now for many years. And, you know, it's like my drag racing buddies will say to me, man, how much money are you going to have in that flathead when it's done? And I tell them, and they just go, man, oh man, and how much horsepower will it make? And I say, well, about 180.
Yeah, which
and
is,
they just shake
by the
their
way,
heads,
that's very impressive out of a flatty. That's nice power out of a flathead.
It is, but, a good, strong, Merc cranked 69A with good cam and heads and everything in good tune, 297s and all that, that's about what it should make in top tune. But to me, it's about the experience. I want to experience what those guys experienced. And I feel that way about my Chevelle, as much as it's changed cosmetically, because it was a placer gold car with black stripes originally, and that's how it looked when I drove it to high school. It still feels and smells like my car, the car I've had my whole life. And I just kind of want it to always be that way. I like how rude it is, and it's got a really rough idle and sets off car alarms, and it, it makes 530 horsepower on pump gas, and it's just a riot. It's like driving in the rain all the time. So it's just to me, it's what a muscle car, it should be for me. I know that people upgrade them these days, and that's great too. But there's just something about, like, this is what one would have been like in 1976 if the guy worked at the local speed shop.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. But I love the thing. I'll never ever sell it. It's great.
Very cool. Well, I want to share something with you and everybody else that's listening. I've done it, David. I've cracked the code. There's been this question out in the universe: what is the connection between rock and roll and hot rods? What is the connection? And there's theories, there's debates, there's blogs, there's books, there's songs written about it. Of course, hundreds of songs. And I want to tell you that I've figured it out. And I'm not setting it up for a joke, but I was thinking about this a lot today. And I want your opinion on this after I've done spewing my faux knowledge here. When you're experiencing a song, whether it's being sucked into it with a pair of headphones on or playing it live on stage, there's only one place that you can possibly be, and that is in the moment. Forgive me for getting all zen and all metaphysical and all that kind of stuff, but the only time that we ever have is the here and now. We don't have yesterday anymore, and tomorrow it hasn't happened yet. So when you're absorbed in music, I know this because, I spent 10 years on the road and I still dabble in music. And when you're absorbed in it, when you're in it, you have no choice but to be in the moment. And now when I take myself back to when I remember recent experiences like blocking out a panel or banging through the gears on an eighth mile or quarter mile strip, if you're not in the moment, you're not in it. You have to be absorbed into it. So they share that commonality. Those two experiences you have to be present for them. So that's my theory. What do you think about that?
Man, I think that's spot on. I couldn't have said it anywhere near that good, but that's exactly how I feel about it. I love that. I mean, and please go crazy. Get all zen about it. I mean, I find myself when I talk about it just, rambling on like crazy in a silly and romantic way. But, they are two things that I love so much, and I enjoy talking about them because they're infinitely fascinating to me. Because it's a thing that you're always chasing. It never.
Yeah, and you're chasing the rush of being in the moment.
That certainly, but there's also, as resolved as some things can seem to be, at times, there's a real lack of resolution for me, or, I told you I wasn't going to be able to articulate this, but, I mean, that's how music feels to me. It's like when people talk about Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, spending so much crazy time on a track and just trying everything in the world and man, isn't that crazy? I think, well, no, that's not crazy at all because the possibilities are infinite
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's like that with any art form. And you know, to me, yeah, the tie-in is really, you know, it's youth-based. I feel like, you know, rock and roll music, blues music, roots music, any kind of music that is really authentic, you know, or has kind of the mark of its maker all over it. It'll always have a kind of youthful spirit about it because it's kind of like, you know, it's very expressive in a reckless way. And
Yeah.
I feel like hot rodding is that way too. It's very expressive in this kind of reckless way. It's got a feeling of danger about it. But, you know, with any art form, again, it's like there's a thing about it, as much as you think you understand it, it'll make you chase it.
Yeah.
It'll make you keep coming back. And I love that about both of those things. And I have absolutely no problem calling any part of the hot rodding world an art form, because it is. And man, I mean, I think some of the stuff that guys are doing, you know, with I mean, just as an example, just because I'm close to this world, this is kind of where I swim out here. You know, there was kind of a faux patina thing that happened, and that's all cool. But as we've kind of come out of that, as far as talking about traditional hot rodding, there's something about what these guys are now doing that I'm seeing, the guys in Burbank, guys in Pasadena, North Hollywood. There are guys who are building these old hot rods, and they are using and like hand-picking these beautifully patinaed old original parts. And
yeah.
And they're mating them to other patinaed old original parts that have a harmony to them.
Yeah.
The combination has this great harmony, and when the car's all together, it looks and feels like something that truly has been together for 60, 70 years. I mean, this guy, Bobby Green, who does the Old Crow Speed Shop in Burbank, there's another guy, Marion Bledsoe, who really just has a great feel for that stuff, and they build these cars that just have there's something so human about them. Like it's like an old hammer, you know, that just is so worn in, and you just get a sense of the guy who used it. And I think, you know, I look at old guitars that are all worn down and played in, and I get the same feeling, you know, about them. I mean,
you can pay $8-10 grand to Fender or Gibson's custom shops and get a patinaed guitar. They call it a relic guitar for those guys that don't know. And I liked the art form and kind of the expression and the how-to of creating patina, if you will. But it's nice to know that whole push for trying to recreate patina has maybe brought people's attention towards what real patina is, and maybe elevated or lifted that part of the hobby a little bit. What do you think?
Oh, I think absolutely. I when I started seeing that movement happening, I thought, well, there you go. Now we're talking. I mean, because again, the faux patina thing is beautiful, and that's an art form, no doubt about it. But there's something about a piece that has been truly weathering since the 30s or 40s or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That alone is a cool thing to find. You find that thing, and you know, it's that saying in hot rodding, like, oh man, I'd build a car around that. You know?
Yeah.
That thing is so cool.
I've got these distinct memories of in my Uncle Herb's wrecking yard with stacks of old Studebakers, and I remember particularly right now, I'm closing my eyes thinking about a 48 Chevy pickup that was a tow truck cab, and it was this blue color that with the primer was shown through the hood, and on the peak of the hood by the hood ornament was surface rust. And I used to, when I was just a little kid, drive my Hot Wheels cars on the top of that hood because the tires would make this cool squealing sound and it would echo because there was no engine in between the fenders. And that resonates with me. You know what I mean? It's this memory that bubbles to the top when I see a truck of that body style or a car or something with that particular look to it. So that's why it's attractive to me, is because it brings me back there for a moment.
Oh yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, that cracks open a whole thing of like. I love, one of my favorite things about driving my Chevelle is inevitably when I stop to put gas in it, some guy will come up to me.
Yep.
And he'll just, before he even starts talking, you know what's coming.
Uh-huh.
He's got that look on
just like it.
Yeah, well, or something. He's got a connection to that car.
Yep.
And he hasn't seen or heard one like that in a while. And he's got that look on his face like, oh, man. And you'll get something like, I had one of these, or my uncle had one just like this, and I'll never forget it. He would take me for drives around the lake or through town or whatever it is. Or my friend in high school had one of these, and it was the baddest thing. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. The very idea that vehicle can be a vehicle for pulling out, mining those memories and those emotions.
And not only that, David, but it's an instant kindred spirit with somebody that you've never seen before in your life. And that, to me, is a great part of humanity. So if nothing else, all these old cars bring us together as human beings. So it's a great thing, man.
Oh, man. Yeah, you said it. I mean, you get into this emotionally charged conversation with a complete stranger, and you're finishing each other's sentences. I mean, that's like-minded on another level or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's a funny thing. I just thought of this for some reason, and I love it. I love this, and I wish I had him on tape saying it, because I know that my dad articulated this in a tighter, cleaner way than I ever can. But my dad used to say this thing about cars, and he would usually say it when you were up against the wall on some kind of tuning problem or something like that. And he would just say, well, it's just the same thing that we are. It's just a mechanical thing, but we're made out of the same stuff. It has an electrical charge.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really an air pump is all it is. It's just a pump.
Yeah.
And it takes in fuel, and it produces all this power and energy. And you have to think of, well, when you're under the weather or you've run yourself down, think back to why that happened and how that happened. And then you translate that into the car.
Interesting.
And I at the time I took it as a very kind of literal thing, like, oh, he's trying to make me understand the car and how a car works, and here you can relate to it this way. But over the years, it became more of an emotional thing to me, like that. Maybe that's why we have this kind of visceral reaction to the sound, or better yet, the feel of a car that is so dialed in, so well done, so ready to go, so eager. Maybe there is some kind of weird connection. I don't know. I mean, I've clearly taken you out from under the gun on your Zen thing earlier, because now I'm really spinning off the track.
No, this is fascinating. This is neat stuff. Yeah, truly, if you get down to a microscopic and a molecular level, we're all just atoms and energy anyways, same as the cars and stuff. So, I don't know, to me, I don't know, people name their cars. They call them he or she, and on the TV shows that I do, we give our projects names, and my little Mustang is named Jaded, and that's because she's pissed off and jaded, and
Yeah.
so it. I think what your dad maybe was trying to do was basically kind of getting you tuned into to diagnostics and trying to analogize things, which is fantastic, and that's what I got from it. And it's really neat that you hold on to that and take it to a deeper level, on more of a spiritual level almost. It's cool.
Well, I mean, you can understand this, I know, because you're a musician. Your brain, your whatever, you will just go there, once you start working that muscle in your life and kind of using your emotions to your benefit and channeling them into something you're creating, which again, car guys do that all the time. That's what builders are doing all the time. They're sculptors and they're great visionaries, and but the music thing, I think it's churned up so much of that stuff for me that I probably, have a little bit more of that, showing on my sleeve, than some car guys. But, it's an emotionally artistic thing for me. And I love that about it because, again, it makes it infinitely fascinating. I'll never be bored with any of it, just like I'll never be bored with music.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, for you and me, David, I think I think the question of what are we going to, you and I are both about the same age, so the question of what are we going to do when we grow up, it's pure academics at this point. We pretty much know that in the first place we're not, and in the second place our career paths are just sort of set, but with some fun things to come, surely. But I wanted to ask you, with all that you've done, your fantastic tenure with unbelievably great artists, and you at one of them, and as well as this really neat aspect of the hot rodding world that you've become a part of. What's next for David Steele?
Well, what's next for David Steele? Really.
Or is it just continuing on with this awesome life that you've created for yourself?
Well, that's nice of you. I can't complain. That's for sure. I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches, what I've been able to get away with. It's just crazy. But, I moved to California. It'll be 2 years in March that I've been out here. And the whole thing with moving to California was really just to take what I'd always been doing, which was playing music for a living, playing with my cars, being involved in the car hobby, being involved in the music world, and trying to take that to the next level. And maybe it was, maybe a cheap and easy way to do it, to just go where it's kind of happening more than it's happening anywhere else, as far as the car thing, because it's such a huge part of the culture here, and the car community is literally overwhelming. I mean, the events are just unbelievable, and you could never exaggerate it, I mean,
well, and for music, you've got to be where the business is, period. A wise man told me that a long time ago when I was banging out cover songs in clubs in Western Canada. He said, "What are you doing here? Go somewhere where the business is." And he was right. So you are that. You were doing that.
And you did that. You came to L.A.,
Star.
And it
went back home.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's a tough place, man. It's overwhelming. I mean, I won't kid you. It's a lot. It's a lot. But, as much challenge as there is here, there's an equal upside. I mean, when it pays off, it pays off big, and not in super crazy grand ways. I mean, just in that, I had really no, the music thing was never really lacking for me in Nashville. There's plenty of music in Nashville. but there's a certain kind of music that's made out here that there wasn't much of there. So I guess there was a little something missing for me. But of course, that's changed a bit in Nashville now. But anyway, the car hobby thing, I was coming out here all the time, going to car events because I really do love the traditional hot rodding thing, and there really was not much of that going on in Tennessee. And all of the guys I was getting to know who were building cars like I was building, flathead-powered, Ford-based, traditional hot rods, 40s and 30s style, early 50s maybe. Stuff seemed to all be kind of happening here, or a lot of it anyway. And so really what's next for me is just to make more and more sense out of living in California and play more and more music and get deeper into the car thing. And, so far so good. My lights are on and I stay very busy, and I get to do this stuff with the foundation, which is such a joy. And when I go to, a traditional hot rod event, it's literally with, some of my biggest heroes. I mean, guys that I've admired my whole life, and they are the community, and it's really, really fun. It's really fun.
Perfect. Well, listen, before we sign off, is there anybody that you'd like to acknowledge, or somebody you'd like to thank or shout out, or anything like that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'd really like to thank the Sparks family for making my move to California possible, because one of the things I do out here is I spend time at their property, Tom's old house, and I sort through the estate and help them with things, placing the old, the cars from the collection and the memorabilia, automobilia and stuff. And, they've really, Jenny and Barbara Sparks are just wonderful people, just like their parents were. And, when I was coming out here and paddling around with Tom, I didn't see them that much. I didn't know them. They have, lives of their own, and they live a little ways outside of town. So getting to know them and getting to kind of have this California family, because I had this great relationship with their parents, has been such a blessing, because it's just a continuation of that thing, which I do miss. But what a wonderful thing to be able to come out here and spend time with them and get to know them better. And, they've helped me a ton, and have really made this possible. So that's big. That's really big. And
and they sound like wonderful folks, man.
They're awesome. They're just fantastic. They're like the sisters I never had. So it's really nice.
Very good. Very good. Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us and share of your experiences. And I just want to say out loud, I'm can't wait to see what's coming down the pike for you musically. You owe me a ride in the Tom Sparks truck, and I will give you a ride in the jaded Mustang, and we will grin from ear to ear. And thank you so much for everything. And I'm proud to call you a friend.
Well, likewise, Kevin. Absolutely. You are one of my favorite people of all time. I really mean that. You are a gem and a half. You're awesome. So I look forward to seeing you, and it's a great honor to be on the show. I appreciate you asking me to do this.
Well, we all thank you very much. People, you're listening to Shop Talk. We're talking with David Steele, car guy, rock and roll, guitar hero, blues cat. I could go on and on and on. Go and see this guy play live. You will have your face ripped off. And, I don't know, very cool thing to be a shadow in your world, Dave.
Oh my God. You're the best PR guy I've ever had.
All right. You're listening to Shop Talk, brought to you by the Eastwood Company. Do the job right with Eastwood. David Steele is now living in Southern California and has found a home in the center of both the hot rod world and the music industry, and continues to exercise his passions on both fronts. And we're looking forward to seeing where Dave's name will pop up in both of the media worlds. If you have the chance, log on to the American Hot Rod Foundation and take a look at some of the archives. If you've got any suggestions or comments about Shop Talk, drop us a line and we'll take a look and who knows, maybe work it into a show. In the meantime, check out Eastwood on Facebook and on the Eastwood.com website and keep on pursuing your passion, whatever it is. I'm Kevin Tates, and this is Shop Talk. Do the job right with Eastwood. In the meantime, check out everything at the Eastwood.com website. Eastwood has what it takes to do the job right. And you know me, I like to do the job right. Thanks for listening to Shop Talk. I'm Kevin Tates.